one.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for logging in to Mocktails and Masterpieces. I'm Matthew Kramer, Music Director of the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. Very busy week ahead. For the ICO, throughout the pandemic, we have continued to perform. We performed virtually. We've been recording education programming in the last month, and we've been staying very active. For me personally, this is the week that I've been looking forward to for some time, because it's a program of music that I feel very passionately about, and we're coupling it with an education program on the same subject, American music. We have a wealth, as short-lived as our country has been, a wealth of incredible music to pick from when we're programming, and this is a program of mid-century masterpieces by four composers who I care very deeply about. And we have a spectacular guest artist who's with us on our mocktails tonight. It's a pleasure to welcome Rubén Rengel, violinist who's joining us this weekend. Rubén, welcome to Indianapolis. I'm glad you got in safely. Great to see you. How are you?
I'm great, Matthew. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation and this week.
So this is a conversation that we've had now for several months. You joined us so generously for our virtual gala, which was back in February. We spoke at that time about the concerto you're going to play this weekend, which is the Samuel Barber Violin Concerto. For those of the audience who are tuning in right now and didn't have the opportunity to see our interview together, I'd love for them just to take this moment here to get to know you a little bit better. Perhaps you can let us know a little bit about yourself, and in particular, when the first time that you recall having a violin in your hand was.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a long time ago now. I actually started playing violin when I was around 3 years old. So I don't particularly remember that specific moment, but of course, growing up with the violin has always been such a special thing to me. It's basically an extension of my expression, of my voice. And yeah, I come from a musical family. I grew up in Venezuela, and I started in El Sistema, the great national organization that provides music education and music programs throughout the country. And yeah, my parents were always so supportive of me kind of starting that young, and later on getting more and more involved with music. Then I studied at the Emil Friedman School, which is an art school, I guess you can call it, which has a great conservatory and shares a lot of the teachers with the El Sistema program. I had an amazing, truly life-changing teacher there. I studied with him for about 10 years before I moved to the States. I did my undergraduate at the Cleveland Institute of Music, my master's at the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University, and then I did another graduate studies at the Manhattan School of Music, and now I am an Ensemble Connect Fellow through Carnegie Hall. And yeah, and regarding the piece that we're going to perform this week, it's been one of my favorite concertos actually for many years. And I've played it not with orchestra actually. So this is going to be my first time with orchestra. So I can't tell you how excited I am.
Well, I've heard you perform it with piano, just exquisite, gorgeous playing. And I want to talk to you more specifically about the concerto in the moment. First of all, to those of you tuning in right now, we are streaming live. So if you'd like to ask Rubén or myself a question in the next 20 minutes here, you can certainly do that in the Facebook comments, and those will get relayed to us, and we'll be happy to address those questions. But I'm fascinated, Rubén, because El Sistema has really become a major name in music education in this country and in Europe. And of course, the roots are there in Venezuela. And you're, like Gustavo Dudamel, as I'm sure you hear so much, and so many other figures who have come out of Venezuela with a passion, a pedigree, and just just so much experience within this system. Could you speak to us a little bit about what classical music is like in Venezuela, the passion that young people just so intuitively seem to have for these great composers and their instruments?
Yeah. Um, I, I I'll say that I don't consider myself necessarily a product of like El Sistema itself. I was there for such a brief period, and when I was so young that I definitely consider myself a part of the Emil Friedman school, that parallel school that I was mentioning. But of course, I have so many friends. I mean, countless friends from El Sistema that have been able to, leave the country now, of course, under the specific critical circumstances in Venezuela, but they're able to share their talents and bring their music around the world. And growing up in Venezuela, that movement of that incredible cultural movement, I definitely took advantage of that and was able to be immersed in a beautiful movement of great music all around, and not just classical. My dad actually is a Venezuelan folk musician, and I also grew up improvising and accompanying him and immersed in that whole different culture of Venezuelan music and Latin American music, and later got into jazz and explored all of those genres as well. But yeah, there's as you mentioned, it's such a big organization, the El Sistema itself, that it kind of permeates all around the country. Everybody knows about it. We have the great heroes that have come out of it, and I was fortunate that I could kind of be parallel to that, and immersed also in the whole great cultural waves that were going on. Yeah.
I love this about your background, that you have diversity in the genres of music in which you were exposed to and you perform in, and it's very rare, honestly. We talk about I'm a violinist myself way back when, but I had no experience in jazz and improvisation. And you ask a classical musician to improvise, they end up playing scales and arpeggios. They don't really know how to do this because it is such a unique and a rarefied art form. And so difficult to do. But in your upbringing with your father, were there distinctions between one and the other, or was it just an average day for you to be playing Mozart and then improvising? And it sounds like you were well versed in all musical genres from a very early age.
I've been lucky to be able to grow up in kind of many genres, and I feel that it actually enhances every time I play the other genre. Like the Venezuelan tunes enhance the way I played the Tchaikovsky or the Barber in a really big way, actually, and the other way around, obviously, as well. I guess I was always conscious of the differences in styles and genres and the way that things operate within each genre. But I always felt the genuine connection that you can build with the audience through any type of music. So so although I was conscious of the differences, of the distinctions there in styles and the way you go about performing the genres, I always tried my best to kind of not think about them too much and make the most out of every type of music and connect with people through any note that I was playing.
So your educational, your training, your teachers, as you've already mentioned, I mean, some of the big names, the big institutions in Venezuela and in this country as well. And you became very close through your distinction in the competition with another major organization in this country, and that's the Sphinx Organization. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about Sphinx, your relationship as a first prize winner, with that organization, and just a little bit about Sphinx in general, what doors it's opened for you, and the kind of the work they're doing now in the American classical scene.
Absolutely. Yes, I think I've said to you before that I've long admired the Sphinx organization, and it's an honor to be a part of bringing their mission to fruition. I was the winner of the 2018 Sphinx competition, and their mission is really to transform lives through the power of diversity in the arts, uh, and they're really true to that, and they are expanding the way that they go about um, transforming lives, really. uh, I think Sphinx first started as a competition itself, and that's been their leading kind of program, but they've diversified what they do so much. They have educational programs at all levels. They have a huge conference in the arts that so many organizations come to learn about and to discuss about diversity in the arts, and it's obviously an ongoing uh, effort from everybody, but it's so great to see that Sphinx is able to connect with so many great institutions to be able to collaborate nationally in that sense.
Mhm. I should mention to our listeners that you just got in today. You are not at the Palladium right now, despite the backdrop warming up. Everything begins tomorrow for this very busy weekend for the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. I just mentioned to the listeners that last month we recorded components for two education concerts, Peter and the Wolf component, as well as a program called Domination and Defiance, which we're going to merge with James Aikman's Peacemakers, ICO composer in residence. But we're also recording an educational program this weekend called What Makes Music American. Last month, we talked with Joshua Thompson, a pianist and music sociologist, who is a co-creator in this program. Rubén, you're going to play an integral role in this program because you're performing on it. And we'll have an opportunity to chat briefly about your experiences as a young musician. And education obviously is so important. You are a product of great education, and your talent emerges from that. Do you find that when you've traveled and played with the orchestras that you're doing now as a soloist, more work in education, talking to young people, master classes perhaps? Do you find, because certainly I do, that the soloists are now more involved in reaching young people? I'm just curious your impressions on that.
Definitely. And it's something that I love to do. So I was grateful that I can be a part of it here as well. Um, yeah, I think it's that's an effort that we all have to do in the music industry. I think it's our duty, and our, since we received great music education, sometimes we as musicians tend to take it for granted, or maybe not have it such as a top priority, but it really needs to be, and I think it is starting to. Well, it's been for many years now, but everyone is leaning on that to really cultivate the next generation, and to really make sure that our beautiful music lives on through culture and tradition.
Wonderful. This program, just for those of you tuning in, will be recorded on Saturday night and will be edited through the course of the summer. All three education programs that the ICO has recorded will then be available free to public school districts in Central Indiana and beyond, complete with curriculum guides for teachers and educators. And so we're just delighted that Rubén is playing such an integral role in that education program. But front and center, the reason you're in town here is for our subscription concert this Sunday night at the Palladium. It's an American program, as I mentioned. Specifically, it's a mid-century American program, all works composed within the 1940s. And I was very specific for the reason of this. I just want to mention that the great American conductor Gerard Schwartz made a comment a couple months ago on a podcast that as Americans, we don't particularly do a very good job of celebrating the composers from decades behind us. For example, in Austria, Germany, you'll find Mozart, Haydn, obviously well represented in this country as well. But the impressions that I got from this podcast, and I share very much so, is that we're a country for the new. We always have world premieres. There's always new works being touted out. But the composers that are on this program specifically, Walter Piston, David Diamond, Samuel Barber, not so much because he's in the repertoire, but Howard Swanson. I mean, these are composers who were very big names in the 1940s, 1950s, and they're rarely, if ever, programmed in a concert hall in this country anymore. It's very, very rare. And if it is, it's just a handful of works. And of course, there's no shortage of Bernstein, Gershwin, Copland, Barber, as I mentioned, but how many American musicians really know the works of Walter Piston and Virgil Thompson and Creston, and the list goes on and on, Roy Harris. So we have these works on this program, which I care very deeply about. But the one work that really doesn't need any defense on this program is the Samuel Barber Violin Concerto. It is internationally acclaimed. It is without question in my mind, the most popular American violin concerto, and so many of Barber's pieces are in the repertoire, and I think deservedly so. It's an exquisitely beautiful piece. I just wonder if you can give us your thoughts on this concerto and why it's so appealing for violinists and for listeners.
Absolutely. I think the Barber really embodies the American experience and the American aesthetics, which as a violin concerto, they go so well together. The kind of American sounds with the violin and a beautiful orchestra, which unusually has a piano, but a prominent part, beautiful part. And yeah, I think the thing that speaks to me the most about the Barber is definitely the lyricism in the first and second movements, which, I mean, just gorgeous music. The second movement being especially nostalgic and melancholic. It also definitely has its darker moments, more dramatic at times. And of course, when you get to the third movement, it's a devilish display of virtuosity and fun with the orchestra. Yeah, it's fireworks all around. And I think really, as we are immersed and we bathe in the beautiful sounds of the first and second movements, we're always looking forward to that amazing finale as musicians. And I think for the audience, it's really so effective in that sense. The first and second movements being very beautiful, very elegant, melancholic, nostalgic, and then the third movement ends it all with a bang.
Well, that's an interesting story about this piece. One of those anecdotes that I think is the most famous of any 20th century violin concerto about the reason why that is. The first time I heard the piece, I didn't know the backstory, and I just found that the first two movements shared kind of a similar motivation or a similar aesthetic. And then you get to that last movement, which is so short, but and so, like you said, so crazy virtuosic compared to the other two movements. And do you want to share the story, or it is kind of curious, I thought.
Yeah. The story goes apparently that Barber presents the first two movements to the violinist and his teacher, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's beautiful music," but they didn't think it was so demanding for the violinist.
Yeah.
So being a concerto, you need a little bit of virtuosity there, some heroic qualities to display in the violin as well. So he went to work and came back with the third movement, which definitely delivered on that.
It does. It's so short, but it's almost like you could feel like the sense of like, well, how do you like it now? You ask for it, and this is what you get, and it's a moto perpetual. It doesn't stop for the violin. Very effective. But again, I can't think of another violin concerto off the top of my head that has such a stark aesthetic separation between two movements that are so lyrical, melancholic, as you so beautifully said, and a last movement, which is just a completely different world of sound altogether. And yet it works. It works so well for all of us. You get to share the limelight in the second movement with the oboe player. The oboes always love the violin concertos, Beethoven and Brahms and Barber. So very, very, very lyrical here. Rubén, I want you to enjoy your time in Indianapolis, as I'm sure you will. I mean, certainly crazy circumstances here, this past year that we've dealt with, but we just are elated that you're in town. We're gearing up for a beautiful Barber concerto tomorrow in rehearsal, and then Sunday at the Palladium. I hope your experience in Indianapolis is very positive. Thanks for spending a little bit of time on our mocktails and masterpieces tonight. I look forward to tomorrow. And for all of you tuning in, we hope that you can join Rubén and myself, the musicians of the Chamber Orchestra, as we engage in our first live performance in well over a year. It's very exciting at the Palladium. Visit our webpage or Facebook page for more information, but we're thrilled to be back for in-person concerts. Rubén, welcome. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in rehearsal, and a beautiful Barber this weekend. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Great to be here with you all.
I appreciate that. Good night, everybody. Thank you.